Welcome everybody for joining us to the latest episode of Synagogue Tech. The opportunity for you to ask questions about where you're going with streaming and where you're going with your services over the period and as we move forward for yet another year. It was interesting to see the first post this year that I've seen of somebody who's already pre-recording their High Holy Days. That was a bit of a worry when I saw that earlier this week. I'm like, oh, that's happening too quickly. We've got a panel here this day. We've got two sessions that we're going to cover, but the first panel and the first thing I'd like to do is introduce you to the panel and ask them to introduce themselves. So first up, for a regular we have here is Oren.
Hello, I'm Oren Steinitz, Rabbi in Elmira, New York. It's my, fourth, fifth time on this panel, I think. Yeah.
It is. And Oren is one of the leads behind the Dreaming Up 5781.
Yes.
Could we be doing 5790 before we're back to the real world? I hope not, but there you go. Next up is a regular panelist as well as Marty.
Hi there, Leo. How you doing?
Very well. Come.
Yeah, so I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm an engineer and a consultant and a contractor. Been working in radio and television and media for over 40 years or so.
Thank you, Marty. Next up, we've got two new people to the panel who will be covering the sessions that we're going to be covering first. The first up is Leah.
Hi, I'm Rabbi Leah Mühlstein. I'm one of the rabbis at the Ark Synagogue in Northwest London. Leo's rabbi, or one of Leo's rabbis. Leo has many rabbis. And kind of the tech rabbi for the synagogue, really.
Thank you. And the last up that we have is Yuval.
Hello, I'm Rabbi Yuval Karen I'm the Rabbi of Southgate Progressive Synagogue in North London, not too far from the Ark Synagogue where Rabbi Leah is a rabbi, but actually I live in Pinner, which is even nearer. And I find myself as the only rabbi in the community. I'm also if you want, the tech guru in my community. And I was the one driving the streaming, starting from home and then later in the synagogue.
So that leads us on really nicely about what we're going to discuss today. And I'm really going to try and use this as a little bit of a round table to ask Leah, Oren and Yuval their sort of experience of where they've been streaming and how they've got from where they were. Where were you 2 years ago? Where were you at the beginning of lockdown, and where have you gone in the middle of those? And really just to get a feel for how you've moved your services and whether that's been in Zoom or in streaming to today. So I'm just going to start with Leah to give a quick background of where they've gone from where you were to where you are today.
Thank you, Leo. I'm going to share my screen. I can't share my screen because you have to make me a co-host.
There's the two things of this world is, can I share my screen and can you unmute? They're two words that everybody knows exactly what you're talking about.
Absolutely. And now I have to make sure that I share the right screen with you, but I think I've got it. So where we started, and I really can't take any credit for this, so all credit must go to Leo. And actually, even before Leo, Richard Conradi, who was our tech volunteer, we started off like many synagogues, one camera at the back of the sanctuary, one fixed view. So what you see on the screen is basically what our streaming looked like, more or less for I would say 4 years, something like that. I can't remember the exact dates. And that was whether we were leading the service from the lower bimmer or the upper bimmer, that was the camera angle you got. And really, we paid almost no attention to the stream. I never watched the live stream, for example, myself. I never even looked at the experience. I think one of the things that I need to mention of what we did do, which was our saving grace for the last high holidays, was for the high holidays, because we were not in the same venue. We rent a venue for the high holidays normally, so we were not in our sanctuary. We had the lovely team of Leo and John do our streaming from that venue, and there you can see we had different camera angles. So we had a camera angle for the choir, we had for the bimmer, and it was really manually controlled. So John was fully the cameraman who was controlling it. So that's where we were at. So think back to this is literally the week before lockdown. This is what it looked like. Lockdown came in for us kind of midweek. The last service we had in the sanctuary was a big bar mitzvah, 220 people, full capacity of the sanctuary. And everyone thought I was ridiculous, that I suggested we should at least not shake hands. But the following week, lockdown. This is literally our first lockdown service. So you can see, luckily, thanks to Leo and John, who came in right away, we did move. You can see no social distancing yet. The following week, I'll show you the week after as well. We started to put the liturgy on slides, but you can see basically it's just the page from the prayer book. That was the PDF of the prayer book. That's just what we shared. And we had one camera, no controls for us, just that. The following week, and then I think Leo, if we have time, Leo could show the video of the setup. Everything already got transformed, and we got moved aside, so we now have social distancing, 2 lecterns, and I started to get my control deck. So at the beginning, ATM Mini, 4 cameras that I could select, 3 cameras and a liturgy, and we started to see, can we design our own liturgy slides? This was literally on an iPad where I was swiping the pages on the iPad. Not a great experience necessarily for me or anyone else, and you can see quality pretty crummy, but we did have different camera angles, so we could at least swap between the different camera angles. We then eventually said, okay, this is not enough anymore. We need to learn OBS, or Leo taught us OBS. So we started using OBS. So the next incarnation you see is us with OBS. You can see the liturgy starts looking more sophisticated. In the beginning, still very much controlled everything. So we had still the ATM Mini, but we were also using a Stream Deck to move the slides. But it's starting to look a bit more like it looks today, but maybe. We did start right away to experiment with things that we couldn't have done before. So we introduced a Torah cam quite early. This is a picture for when we were using already OBS, but we actually did use the Torah cam even when we were still using the iPad for the liturgy and no OBS, and very basic OBS, kind of just for the basic setup. We did the Torah cam, and that for our congregants was really a great new feature, which we've maintained. You could see on the previous slide, the reason why our logo is sort of in a funny place is that that's hiding the camera that was sitting right above my colleague Rabbi Aaron. Then we started to get a little bit more experimental and said, wow, now we've got this technology, we can do fun things. And one of the things we did is for Simchat Torah, and I know Oren has done lots of stuff on this as well, so I don't want to show you too much of it. But we thought, how can we do the hackathon when we can't really have dancing? And we did a zoom through the entire Torah scroll, from Deuteronomy to Genesis, little video that I did. You can see my totally basic video editing. Nothing spectacular, but for the congregants, it was a real wow moment. And I shared the video with Dreaming, and it was like used in, I think, 40 different synagogues around the world who were using the video. So that was, a lot of fun, something different. Then we had a bit of a redesign. We renamed our synagogue. We redesigned everything, and we moved from OBS to Vmix. And this is basically almost where we were at now. This is kind of us a few weeks ago. The only thing that's changed since then is this was when we had 2 cameras, so we could only have kind of one camera on the choir and one camera on us really easily. We had 2 PTZ cameras, but it was very difficult to control and do a lot of single shots. So we had a lot of the angles of the choir being quite spaced out and not so together. Now we have 3 cameras, so we can do a bit of a nicer split screen, and different views, of course. This is all now in Vmix, and we then did like fun things, like for the Pesach Seder, we had us looking like we were actually sitting close together at the table, even though we were a long way apart, with an extra camera on the Seder plate. That was all done through Vmix. So that gives you a little bit of kind of a whirlwind tour of where we've come from. We also did a few things that we would have never done, like a nature service and an animal service. But I think I don't want to take too much time. So I think maybe I'm going to stop here, and Leo, maybe you
I think that's a great starting point.
questions.
I just want to, I know today I asked Leah to give us an overview, and really what I'd like to also do is to get Yuval and Oren to just give their, Leah's gone into details, but Yuval and Oren to give their sort of quicker or their view of where they've gone from over that same period. So maybe we'll start with Yuval. We can hear you. Yuval.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So my story actually begins maybe 10 years ago, when I was thinking we should stream, but that didn't happen for all sorts of reasons. There was some resistance in the community. I couldn't find a person to do it, and as a rabbi, I didn't think it was really my role to start crawling and connecting the machines, and so I couldn't find the opportunity to do it. There were also security issues. There were some people in the synagogue who did not want to maybe the opportunity to be exposed, and for good reasons. So all this really buried the idea of streaming until the COVID-19 came. So until then, we had nothing. There was nothing in the synagogue for streaming. When that happened, really that forces us to think again. And I started from home. And what I had from home is basically a video camera, a camcorder that I started streaming from. I use my own home PC, and sound was very crude. This was really a very, very basic setting that I had. Interestingly, people loved it. And always came for more, which is great. But when I we experimented and changed things, and started using Zoom. Then I started investing a little bit more in better equipment and better sound system, but still small steps all along. The big step was when we decided to go back to the synagogue and actually stream from the synagogue. And this is where we started investing purchasing 2 PTZ cameras, and with Leo's great help, we thought of all sorts of things, but Leo really sent us in the right direction, purchasing the sound mixer that was really fit for purpose. And we installed everything just in time for the high holidays. The high holidays were all done. Basically, everybody was at home. I was in the synagogue with my family. And again, it was a great success. The system has improved over time. We just installed our third PTZ camera. The sound improved, the position of things improved. And I have to say, we are just returning to the synagogue now. And I find that people are quite comfortable with us streaming the services rather than coming to the synagogue. The future will see what we're going to do. But at the moment, it looks like there are more people who would rather sit at home than come to synagogue. We still have good numbers.
Bringing that on to Oren, and there's going to be I know Oren's going to have Yuval probably stole Oren's beginning first sentence about he was just about to do it this all. So Oren.
Okay, so like I mentioned a few times in this panel, 2 weeks before COVID hit, my board voted down a motion to start streaming services. Because from all the things that Yuval mentioned, I'm afraid that people will see me on the internet. I don't want people to know that I'm Jewish. I don't like looking at myself on camera, etc., 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 etc. Then COVID hit. And within 2 days, my rabbinic intern Malachi and myself just started streaming from the chapel. We basically declared ourselves to be a pod or a bubble, as you know, his family and my family are hanging out together quite often. So we decided both of us can just be in the small sanctuary, and that should be fine. Concerning all the resistance we had before COVID, we were kind of shocked at how many people logged on the first week. It was a lot more people than we would usually see on a Friday night or Saturday morning in the sanctuary. And this has not changed in the year and 2 months since that passed. Our attendance or Zoom attendance has been pretty steady. We went through basically from one webcam to older Canon camera connected to an ATEM Mini, to 2 Canon cameras, to 3 cameras. Now we are actually down to 1 camera, but it's a PTZ that we find is not that bad for 2 or 3 liters on in a very small sanctuary. We are now starting to talk about moving to the large sanctuary and moving to hybrid services. That will still take a lot of planning and a lot of thinking and probably a lot of money. We still have people on our board who do not understand why we need this. We do not, people who can't stand Zoom, people who can't stand anything virtual, but it's very difficult for them to fight with the numbers, because we found out that being a small rural synagogue, we reach a lot more people when they can stay in their homes. So this is where we're at. Our sound has been constantly improved. The camera quality has been constantly improved. We are now starting, right as we got really comfortable with PowerPoints, we're now switching to ProPresenter just to make our lives difficult. But we've had our first ProPresenter service this week, and it was fabulous. So we'll see how this goes.
Thank you, Oren, and thank you all 3 of you for giving us an overview of where you are and how you've got to where you are today. For those who are watching, there's links to Slido for you to put in questions. We've had quite a lot of questions already come in. We would like, this is your opportunity to ask people who've come on that journey and to experience there and where you're going yourself in what you're doing in your own synagogue, and to follow up and see where we're going to go. So I've got a number of questions, but I'm also going to put in some questions myself. But the first thing really, just to understand from all of you, there's a theme that I've come across with every time I talk here, and that's there's a resistance to do this. And you all three of you mentioned to some extent some sort of feeling like there's a resistance, or almost it was like it was a forgotten thing. I think you said it, Leah, at the beginning, that while you'd been streaming for 4 years, it's probably almost like we forgot. You could almost argue, was the camera even? Did we even remember it was there, or it's just an inconvenience? In your discussions with your with whoever runs your synagogue, do you find that that has changed, that people are now far more interested in this? I'll start with Leah on that one.
So I think it's definitely changed. I think partly it's because it's less alien to people, and I think many people thought it will be impossible for people to learn how to use any of this technology, and then they discovered that everyone suddenly learned Zoom really quickly. So actually, I think that hurdle has come down, and I think it has changed drastically. I think the one thing, so I used to be one of the people who was like, I was against having lots of archived services, partly because I felt like actually I'm at that point in my career where I might want to apply for other jobs, and I didn't necessarily want my most naff services to also be available for everyone to watch in forever. I think that has also changed because now everyone can watch everyone's naff services online forever, and I think that's therefore for me it's different, right? It's different whether they can just only see your moments where you rock up and you're actually too ill to take services, but you do it anyway because that's what you do as a rabbi. So I think all of our comfort level with technology has changed, and so it's definitely much easier the conversations.
And Oren, taking that from where you are, because obviously you are hugely involved in the setup of Dreaming Up 5780, which became 5781. Did this whole thing play on that side? How did that come about on there in the technical?
I think so. We see this a lot in Dreaming 5781 of, many rabbis and cantors and community leaders are still probably vastly uncomfortable with the idea that they have to learn these new skills. Like, we did not go to rabbinical school for that. And you know what? Sometimes I have that, despite having I say a dirty background in tech and sound engineering, this is, I could have saved myself a lot of years of school if I if I would have stayed there. Last week we were installing a PTZ camera mount, and my assistant and I are standing there on ladders drilling, and I am counting 4 years underground, 3 years master's, 6 years PhD, 3 years smicha, 5 years another smicha. It's and I'm here drilling holes. On the other hand, seeing all the little old ladies of the show there week after week, just can't that so looking forward to their little bit of connection, be it services or Talmud class or book club or what have you. I think we're doing something right, and I think that most of our board knows that, and I think most of our congregants are very, very happy with this. Our executive director laughs that we have all these people who are pushing for a return to the synagogue, but they have no interest in coming in person themselves. So we'll see how this goes. This will be a very, I think, what Yuval mentioned, that most people are happier staying at home, wearing pants or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because Yuval, as you said, there was nothing. Basically there wasn't even, there was electricity in your synagogue, but as far as internet's concerned, nothing at the very little. And you've moved your community on. are they now turning around to you and saying, right, this is, are they turning to you to say, where are you going next? You just mentioned you have 3 cameras. It's a big change where you are.
It's huge.
I have to say that a lot of it was my own drive. So, for example, the 3rd camera is something I dreamt about when we started the whole thing, and I wanted 3 PTZ cameras. Eventually, I found the money to do it. I have to say that my community, yes, definitely took to it, supported me in many, many ways. So, for example, there was no budget for it. So what do? I've asked them to reach to their pockets, and they did, big time. Were very generous about it, maybe realizing that this is what we needed to do for the synagogue. My executive and council were absolutely 100% behind the ideas, and this is still happening. I think we're still kind of lacking this is the budget for maintenance and the upkeep and the upgrade and so on, but it will come. I think it will come over time. And one of the best things that happened is that people started volunteering to actually control the equipment. So they come, we have a rota now of people who come to the synagogue and do these things. That means now I could have done it all by myself, but I'm really glad that we have the volunteers who will do it for me. So a lot of good things that happen as a result of us introducing the technology.
So we've had a number of questions, and as I say, keep putting your questions in. So I'm going to take a couple of questions here. The first one I've got is from John Himes. What was the best single purchase you've made in the last year? So that's an open question to all of the panel. And we've been joined also by Brody, but I don't know if he's going to be joining us to speak. But so to anybody.
I mean, I think it's really difficult to say what is the best single purchase, because I would probably say in terms of what moved us the furthest along is probably Vmix. But on the other hand, Vmix would be nothing without the cameras and the sound tech that feeds into it, right? So I think what has kind of transformed it looking and running really professional, probably Vmix, but then without the Stream Deck to control it. So it's very difficult.
Yuval?
I would say that Stream Deck is the best purchase. It was probably the cheapest as well. But what I find, I actually have it on the Beamer, so the controllers don't have it, only me. And they can see me doing all sorts of magic, which is what, I think rabbis are all about, isn't it? So fantastic.
Oren, do you have anything to add on this one?
I'd say that's probably the ATEM Mini that really sent us to the next level in terms of what we could do in terms of capture and use of multiple cameras. But you know what? We've had the Stream Deck for a while, and I didn't really get what this was about until a couple of weeks ago when we installed Companion on it, and all of a sudden, now this is my favorite thing in the world. So
it is a really interesting thing of how all of these components, and I think as Leah mentioned, the bit where they come together. I mean, Marty, from your perspective, from the churches that you work on, is there any things that you would say literally are the unlocking device, the best single purchase?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's, everything is interconnected, and as Leah was saying and Oren was saying, it's tough to choose between one or the other. What makes a biggest purchase? The ATEM Mini Pro, Stream Deck. These are integral to what capabilities you have and what options you have to do different things. But then there's the cameras that makes you look good, and that makes a big difference too. It's all interconnected.
So I would argue, as to the one bit that has made the biggest difference to every single one, has been the move to get them to install digital mixers. The fact that they've all got, and it's almost like nobody knows it's there. Almost nobody knows it's there until. But in the case of Yuval went to an XR18, Leah's an X32. I don't know, Oren, what mixer you have there, but
XR16.
16. It just is the biggest, and it actually, you don't even know it's there. I mean, I know Marty's actually got an XR18 under his desk, but it's the biggest single thing that you never talk about it, and you shouldn't need to talk about it. I'm going to skip over that question because we'll come to it a bit later. From Marty, well, actually, it's going to cover the two together. Question from Marty. Leah, what prompted the change from OBS to Vmix? What did you gain?
So I think one of the reasons why we tried it was that Vmix offers this fantastic 60-day free trial where you can have it with all bells and whistles. So there was actually no risk whatsoever to try it. And I think one of the things that was driving me crazy was OBS was super unstable with us. So we really had mid-show just suddenly shut down, need to restart, or you really had to, Leo used to sort of make me repeat this, before you start, you reboot the computer. And changing from one profile to another profile was really often made the whole system crash. And what I love about Vmix is that I have my Friday night setup, I have my Tot Shabbat setup, I have my Saturday morning setup. So my tech volunteers who, so we now have tech volunteers who run our cameras and kind of control behind the scenes. They don't have to worry to change the ticker from the Friday night Zoom room to the Saturday morning Zoom room, because when they press the ticker button, because of the different profile, it's already the correct ticker. So it gave us just a lot more functionality. It also, we use Vmix Call to bring in our remote guests, so that we don't need to also do it with Zoom. We find it very easy to incorporate video in the middle of the service. It's super easy it's much neater to set up kind of templates so that your design always looks the same. And I found the other thing is I found the YouTube videos of how do you learn to do X were much better with Vmix than with OBS. With OBS, you're flooded, there are thousands of people who do, this is how you do something on OBS, and you have no guarantee if it's actually any good or not what you're watching. So you might be 45 minutes in and you're like, oh no, this is definitely not going to solve my problem. Whereas Vmix is very, very good on that. And I found it really easy to learn. And I think our tech volunteers found it much more intuitive to learn to use than OBS.
So we've got a related question, which just I'm going to bring in very quickly, is from Michael, which is just to ask, which is how difficult was it to move from OBS to Vmix?
I mean, I found it quite simple. I literally did it in a few hours of the first setup where I just replicated what I had on OBS. And then it took me sort of a couple of weeks. I tried to follow Leo's golden rule of only changing one thing each week. And I don't change anything after Tuesday, so that if things break, they have a few days to break before Shabbat services. So it took me a few weeks to get the best out of Vmix, and I'm still sometimes looking at the scene and going why did I set this up like this? There's a much easier way that will use much less GPU and CPU, all these things that I had no clue about before. I was a scientist, but I wasn't a computer engineer.
I think you forgot one reason that you went to OBS from OBS to Vmix, Leah.
I
kept saying to you all the time, you need to move over to it. You need to go over to it. And I've said the same to Yuval a couple of times and a couple of others on here. It's and it is, but I think that this is the same. The whole reason we have this and we're discussing is the journey between where you are at the beginning and where you are at the moment, and where you are at the moment isn't actually the end of isn't the end of the road. We're always moving forward, and that's the key point of this, is that the reason, if we have this discussion in a year's time, it could be that we're talking about moving off Vmix to something else, but it's just, yeah.
Yeah, just to add one thing, I think the other thing that the reason why we moved to Vmix is that we wanted, Vmix allows, unlike OBS, which it does sort of allow it, but it's much more complicated. On Vmix, it's really simple to stream one thing to the live stream and to send another screen to, for example, a screen in the sanctuary. And I'm personally not the biggest ProPresenter fan. I'm on Windows, which means my Hebrew vowels don't display very nicely on ProPresenter, and I'm totally machmir about
loud and
that.
clear.
And I'm totally machmir about that, and it drives me crazy that it's a program that can't handle right to left script, which Vmix, by the way, does with the GT title designer, does handle right to left script. So but it just means that I know, when we're going to go a hybrid, I know I can send something else to the screens in the sanctuary than to the live stream.
One of the people we haven't got on the panel today, who unfortunately has had to go to a shiva tonight, is Igor, and we've been having a discussion there at another synagogue, and we were going to be able to show it, but we'll show it another time, that he projects the liturgy up onto his beautiful Jerusalem stone either side, and for the exact same reason you just talked about. And while he's doing it with OBS at the moment, he is struggling like hell to get it's like fighting too many things. And as you say, the one thing with Vmix is you literally say, this element I just send here, or this collection of elements I send here, and I create a completely different view. But you can still have the information on there. There's a question that's come in, which I've just seen, which is coming from Mark Hadley, but it's carrying on from where we are, really. Do you have a page of the prayer book projecting in person or in Zoom or on the Zoom stream? Is it doable to have moving cursor showing the current place in Hebrew or English? So how do you handle the movements, Leah, first, and then Oren on that? To people keeping in line with where you are.
So we have moving pages. We don't have don't move a cursor across the page. There are ways you can do that with Vmix, so you could achieve it technically. Practically for me, that would push me over the edge, because I have to lead the service. I'm not controlling the cameras, but to be able to kind of read along. Also, you're going to get problems with the lag anyway. So I often get comments in the comments where it's like, you're turning the pages too quickly. And that's like, well, that's really clearly not possible, because I'm turning the pages while I'm reading them myself.
So Oren and then Yuval on that. What do you do with this, Oren?
Well, you know what? I can just show you. That's easier. Right now, we're using PowerPoint. Give me 2 seconds.
You should be able to share this.
Okay.
I know. Hold on. While you're doing that, let me jump to Yuval, and then while you're getting that ready, sure. Yuval.
So I'll give you a slightly different perspective, because we don't show the liturgy on the screen, not because we can't, but because it is a conscious decision not to do it. We decided that what's more interesting than a small liturgy or even a larger liturgy is to actually show the bima and show and the people who are praying. So we had a drive to encourage people to make sure that they have prayer books in their homes, and almost everybody who joins us will have a prayer book in their homes. So the only time they don't have the prayer book is when we have the biblical passages, and we just project it from, we use PowerPoint, and that seems to be very successful. We don't follow the text, but it's good enough.
Brilliant. It's really interesting to hear the different, this is the great thing. There is no solution to this. There is not one question I think I've asked that we'll ever have, and this is the only solution. We should all become rabbis.
I think
Oren.
there's also about preference. Sorry, Leo.
Yeah,
I think
go on.
it's really about kind of the community also, right? People need to know their own community. That's the most important thing. There isn't right or wrong. It's what's right for this service, for this community.
Yeah, I agree. Oren.
This is a very, very, very good point. As a person who is, myself, is super comfortable with a traditional conservative Masorti service, and my community isn't, this past year has been a great exercise in stretching my comfort zone and understanding that people need a little bit more hand-holding. And the projected liturgy did a lot to improve participation, to improve congregational singing, to improve a lot of stuff. So right now, what will in PowerPoint? Now I can share my screen. How nice! We're just projecting one page at a time, something like this, with nice backgrounds, etc. English, Hebrew. You can do a lot of stuff like that. As we're switching to ProPresenter, and I'll have to stop share and reopen and do stuff. 1 second. I hope this will not bite me here. You know what? Here you go. Okay, this is not exactly how it is projected, but you can see how this works. In ProPresenter, when we're talking about lower thirds, we're actually going to do one line at a time at the order that you're actually singing it. So Veshambu v'nei Yisrael et haShabbat la'asot et haShabbat le'dotam brit olam, etc. But which is very helpful and convenient for the people at home. It's a huge pain in the rear end for us. My assistant, who's been using a foot pedal to switch the slide, said that he had a cramped leg by the end of the service. So we're not exactly sure how we're going to continue doing this. Automation is a possibility, but it's not a great idea. We might need a tech volunteer to just be on either pressing the foot pedal or pressing a mouse button or something like that. We'll see how this goes. I know that Brett, who's not in today, has his army of teen volunteers that are just looking at the liturgy, but that takes time and commitment.
It is, as you say, and actually, I would argue that some of the tools that we will need in the future are not there until we've done 2 or 3 cycles. I know that, as you say, you've translated that. Leah, a lot of the prayer books, some of the prayer books you've translated or you've created ready to appear on screen for your services. Is that right?
Yeah, so one of the reasons why we also like putting the liturgy on the screen is that it gives us flexibility to not just follow the prayer book. Mm-hmm. We were anyway at a point in time where we were sort of and this is we love our current prayer book. Our emeritus rabbi was one of the co-editors of our current prayer book, but it was published in 1995, so it's not the newest liberal prayer book anymore, and it allows us to add new things to the slide to vary. I'm personally, but I think this is, as I say, there's no right or wrong, it's a personal preference. I quite like having more liturgy on the screen or no liturgy. I'm not a fan of the just 1 word or 2 words, because I like, when I participate in the service, I like to be able to browse. I like to be able to decide that, they might be reading the English right now, but I'd like to read the Hebrew, and I'd like to read it a bit at my own pace. So I want to accommodate that, but it is, it remains a challenge. But I now use, at the moment, I use PowerPoint to prepare my liturgy slides, partly because it's the easiest to move across different platforms. I can then use it easily in Zoom when I just have to do it Shiva or something. And also you can buy a lot of liturgy already in PowerPoint, which is great advantage.
So I want to, because we've got a second session part coming up in a minute with Marty, but I want to get this question in, and then some of these other questions I'm going to leave to the end. So really, this one's come from Michael Abrahamson, and it's when you're running services, Leah, do you bring in from their homes on Zoom, or do you just stream? Aaron, the choir, and yourself from inside the synagogue. So I don't know if you showed in your thing. I missed a bit. Did you show your latest setup with 4 screens?
I did show the split screen thing. So we tend to be 4 people in the synagogue. So 2 rabbis and then 2 musicians. We do bring people in. We bring people in live on Vmix call. And we bring in people, and we primarily bring in people by video, pre-recorded video. I have to say, my absolute preference is, unless it's really like a mitzvah for like that moment, like a bar mitzvah or maybe an ofruf or something like that, there is nothing that is more reliable than a video. And it also means that the people can enjoy the service without having to sit there the whole time and going, it's up, I'm up next. Now, I know there is like a lot of debate. Is life the thing, the be all and end all? Many people don't even know that we don't bring the emeritus rabbi in to do the sermon live, that we've pre-recorded him on the Thursday, because they don't see the difference, because when he appears on the Zoom call after the service, he sits in the same room wearing the same clothes. But it's much more reliable. There can't be internet problems. I know exactly how long it is.
I think I remember bringing your emeritus rabbi or our emeritus rabbi in the very first time. And I think we were about 15 seconds before going live before we finally got him in. And this is in the days of OBS, connecting in using Skype, if anybody remembers that. And if he moved slightly, the screen just disappeared. He just disappeared into some corner somewhere. And it was like, just don't move, don't touch anything, and we'll just see if we can get through this. And I think from that moment onwards, it was like, we won't try and do it.
And he never wanted to do it again. It really stressed him out. It like ruined Shabbos for him.
So I've got loads of other questions, which we're going to continue with. But what I want to do, because there's a lot to pack in and there's a reason for this, we're going to be covering a lot more of this in the URPJ Connections is on the 20th of May. And we're going to be covering a very similar session in there to cover this in more detail there. But what I wanted to do after that, and one of the things that we've been talking about a lot, is about audio. And what it means about the audio, the bit that maybe up until now everybody's gone, oh yeah, the tech guy sorts it out. But I just really wanted to get the tech guy to explain a little bit about what this fine art that happens, and where I'm going to hand over to Marty to give us a little bit of a background. Marty.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so we're gonna try and unlock some mysteries here. We're gonna talk about the secret sauce that is the capability to do multiple mixes on a mixer, for audio. Because, well, let's think about this. You're in your sanctuary, and it's pre-COVID, and it's in person, and let's say you have a band, right? Or some sort of musical entertainment, and you've got some percussion, maybe djembes or congas or a drum set, and you've got an electric guitar, an electric bass, and you've got some singers, maybe you've got a violin or a flute. And let's say we're not working with a huge sanctuary. We're talking about, 100 to 200 people that can fit in there. And, with this sort of arrangement of people and musicians, not everything needs to be amplified in the sanctuary, right? Because there's a lot of acoustic energy that some of these instruments generate all on their own, and they're plenty loud. Grand piano, for instance, plenty loud instrument, and really doesn't need to be amplified for those people in the room. However, If you're recording to play this back later, those people can't hear or see the instruments that are on stage. And so they all need to be recorded anyway, right? So even if you don't need to put a microphone out there for people in the sanctuary, you do need to put a microphone out there, bring it into a mixer so that it can be recorded or live streamed, right? So let's break this down, okay? And let's go back to basics. So let's look at a very simple mixer. So this is the M-Shure 67. It is one of the original early audio mixers. In fact, you can find pictures of this on the internet where this particular mixer was used at the original Woodstock Festival in 1969, right? And so it's 4 inputs and 1 output. That's it. 1 output. 4 inputs, 1 out. No tone controls, stripped bare, nothing. That's all there is. And the output of this would go to your loudspeakers. Easy, right? Very simple. But let's say now you want to put a floor monitor on the stage for the musicians to be able to hear. Let's say you want to, you have an overflow room, so you need to do a mix for that. You have a stream, you need to mix for that. So let's take 4 of these mixers and stack them all on top of each other. And all of the inputs go to all of these mixers. So the inputs are just the same. Now what you have is you have a mixer where you have several mixers, each with its own output. And you can take those outputs and go to different places. And using the volume controls on each mixer, you can make a different mix for each of those outputs. Okay, with me? Pretty simple, right? So let's look at a more modern solution. So this is a digital mixer, and you can see that we have all of these different inputs here. Get my cursor to show up. All of these different mixers. We've got a pulpit microphone. We've got some wireless microphones that can come from anywhere. We've got a nice piano in the sanctuary. We've got an electric guitar with its own amplifier. We've got a drum kit, right? And, because we're talking about volunteer musicians, some drummers are very finessed with the sound that they make, and some are just like, they just want to go to town. And then we have a lead singer. So all of these come into this mixer, and I've got them kind of color-coded for a reason. And what kind of outputs do we have? Well, we have the main left-right speakers in the sanctuary, and we have an overflow room, and we've got your streaming mix. And you can see by the number of output lines and colors that not everything goes everywhere. So take the first one is the overflow room. People in this room want to hear everything in the sanctuary. Everything, including if you have people who are participating in the service who are on Zoom, right? So we're going to bring them in from Zoom. We're going to show them on the screen, and we're going to hear their audio, and they're going to do maybe a story. They're going to do a reading. They're going to do something. So we need to be able to hear them. And the people in the overflow need to hear them as well as see them. However, for the main speakers in the sanctuary, we don't need to hear things like the piano. We don't need to hear the electric guitar. We don't need to hear the drums. And so, well, we're gonna do a mix, but we're gonna take those out, and we call that a mix minus. It's a full mix minus the guitar, the drums, and the piano, right? So then let's move on to what we're going to send to people on Zoom, right? So we're going to send a full mix to them minus any audio that is coming from Zoom. So that person that is participating in the service, doing the reading, we're taking the audio from Zoom into the mixer so that they can be heard in the sanctuary, they can be heard in the overflow room, but we do not want to return them back to Zoom because that would cause a feedback loop and with a delay, right? So we're minusing Zoom from this mix. So That in a basic nutshell is the meaning of mix minus and multi-bus mixing. Now, how do we make this happen? How we make this happen is a little bit different. So let's take a look at this in a different fashion. The very basic, there are two modes for doing these multi-bus mixes. They're called pre-fader and post-fader. And let's explore what that means. Because the more basic one is post-fader. And as we looked at the little single channel, single output mixer, and you stack them on top of each other, we can take a look at something like this. As a source comes into a mixer and it goes to the channel fader, everything that comes after that is so after the channel fader, we send one signal to the main output, which goes to your loudspeakers. But in addition to that, we can also go to several other places. So, this kind of mixer, not that one, this kind of mixer is, several mixers stacked on top of each other, each with its own output. So in addition to the main output, we can go to different buses. And I've represented 3 buses here. When you go to there are 3 buses that are coming from this input channel. So bus 1 would go to some place that could go to your stage monitors. Bus 2 can go to your overflow room, and bus 3 can go to Zoom. And from this one input channel, we'll go to a send level. So you can adjust the amount of this signal that goes into this bus. And this bus is also taking audio from all of these other channels as well. So you can independently control how much of each channel goes into this bus. And the same thing for all the other buses. Now, the key thing to remember here is that because each of these bus send levels come after the input channel, any adjustment you make on this input affects the level that goes to all of these buses, right? Including the main output, which is really nothing more than a bus. So we make a change here, and all of these buses are affected. Now, that may be appropriate for some things like going out to Zoom, going out to the overflow room. But when we're talking about a stage monitor, for instance, for musicians, that's not really appropriate because a musician on stage needs to hear certain things at a constant level and a constant balance because they're forming a frame of reference for them to do what they need to do. So the next mode that we can work with is called pre-fade mixing. All right, so things have moved around a little bit because it works a little bit differently. Let's go through it. So we have the same source, and this is our channel fader, right? And it's going to our main mix for our loudspeakers. But before it gets to this, it can also go to the send levels for the buses. So from here, we're going to buses 1, 2, and 3, just like we did with the others, except the audio is coming from a different point in the signal chain. So instead of these buses coming after the channel fader, they're coming from before the channel fader. Now, I can make changes to the channel fader, and all it affects is the output to the main speakers. When I if I wanted to change levels that go to any of these buses, I do it at the send fader, but that's independent of the channel fader. All right. Is this a good place to stop for questions?
I think it is. So I think from my perspective, so why is this important? I think is the big thing I always find with this. Why are we having this discussion? And from my side, it's like, I know this is this dark art, or I didn't know about this dark art a year and a half ago. But when you suddenly realise that the key thing here is, so you're saying, so you've got somebody on stage. We'll use a stage rather than a service because it's easier to say. And there's a singer. The singer wants to hear. What does the singer want to hear?
So all musicians on stage pretty much need to hear for three different reasons. They need to stay in time, they need to stay on pitch, and they need to follow the melody of the song. And the only way that they can do that is by hearing certain other instruments that are playing in the band. They don't necessarily need to hear everything. Like, they don't need to hear the hi-hat cymbal or any of the cymbals. They don't need to hear the tom-toms. They don't necessarily need to hear tambourine, right? So we don't put those in the monitor because that just adds to the noise. They do need to hear maybe the kick drum, the snare drum. They need to hear the keyboard, maybe the rhythm guitar, and they need to hear other singers.
And I guess the other thing that's completely different in the modern environment than it used to be is that there's distance between people. And the minute you put distance between different people, they're hearing things delayed or they're hearing things out of sequence. And so putting something in their ears so they're actually hearing it. I mean, I know, for example, for Leah, the distance between you and what is now the choir is quite distant. And you're hearing things coming back later than you're hearing there. Do you find that with when you're in the service, Leah?
It's much worse than that. Most of at the moment we don't amplify at all because we don't have anyone in the sanctuary. I hear the pianist, but I would say 2 out of our 5 singers I don't hear when they sing. We just have to kind of trust that they do the right thing. It's very, very difficult. And so because we haven't yet worked with, we for the high holidays, we had a kind of a speaker to give us a feedback on the sound feedback on the stage, but we don't use it for regular services. So we're flying blind. Yeah,
Yuval, you have a pianist on Friday nights, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, and I'm the singer.
But how do you have this problem of, once the room is full again, you're going to have different issues, aren't you, with sound and hearing?
Well, actually, I think for some reason our issues are very simple. So one service we have where the pianist is also the singer, and there is no problem there. But also obviously his sound is projected to the room and sent to Zoom. And when I sing, I need to be able to hear the music and sing along to the music, and that goes also into the mix. Both my voice and his the keyboard goes to Zoom. I don't seem to have a problem. I just need to make sure that it's loud enough for me to hear. And if I can hear it, that means everybody else in the room can hear it. Generally, we seem to be managing well. We don't have a full choir. I don't know what will happen if we have more people singing. That might be more of a challenge. And by the way, we don't use in-ear microphones. It's just what I hear is what everybody else hears as well.
Take the case where you have a piano, you have a choir of 20, 30, 40 people, and they're standing in line, maybe a couple of different rows, and the piano is at one end, right? And so the people who are standing right next to the piano hears it great, but the people at the other end of the line, they don't hear so much.
But we use the PA system. We actually use we have speakers in the room, so basically everybody hears the same. The sound does not come from the piano.
They do and they don't. Yeah, go on.
Okay.
Marty, before I bring this over to somebody else.
Yep, because well, if the choir is hearing the PA speakers, then so is the microphone that's picking up the choir, and that's a bad thing, because then you have reverberation and you have echo and stuff like that.
So reverberation sometimes can actually be your friend in this, because once you get things bouncing around and you get that big auditorium or big cathedral is probably the right description view, it doesn't matter where you sing, because you're just all singing in part of a sound that comes together. But when you're singing much closer, it really causes some issues. Oren, how does it what do you have on your side? Because I don't know.
Well, right now, it's a little bit complicated because I play either guitar or keyboards and sing, and I usually have two other people singing with me. We're about 6 feet away from each other, so it's no big deal. We can hear each other very well. What's gonna start becoming a problem is when we get people inside and we actually have to start amplifying things, right? And we're trying to still not create feedback city there. Another problem that we've encountered is that while we have people doing a reading or an aliyah on Zoom, even though our Zoom submix does not include the Zoom sound, it is still picked up from our microphones.
I want to get into the Zoom side a bit later on this one. We're going to cover that in another session.
That is something we have
I want to
not
get
solved yet.
I'm trying to just cover the basics
The
here.
answer to that is Vmix, maybe.
Yeah, but the other we've been joined by David, Rabbi David. How's your audio in the room?
Well, I'm by myself. When I lead services, I'm in an isolated space. I'm by myself. I don't have a big congregation that I have to do hybrid in. So I have my in-ear monitors, and it's easy and golden for me.
So, Marty, I think we've covered, there was a lot of things we've unpacked there. And I didn't want to do, there's always the sort of the view you could sit here and go right to the end of the road and say, well, this is this and this, but people will lose why you're doing it. And I think a lot of people, particularly most of us in here are not music techs by default. And so learning some of the basics of why the thing's done. And when you understand it, I was watching the biography on what TV about Keith Moon yesterday on TV. And he was talking about the fact that he literally had to stand in front of his guitar amp to be able to hear what he was playing at a big rock concert, because the minute he moved away, he couldn't hear what he was playing himself. Because you couldn't in those days, now with what you've just described or what Marty has described, you're able to see that you can move these people apart. And for us in what we're doing, the importance of being able to hear those instruments, being able to hear the other voices and know where you're coming in, when we're going to naturally expand the distance between the people running the services, I think is a key criteria as we move forward. Not least when those people happen to be at the other end of a computer. And that's why this sort of discussion was critical. Okay, I'm going to go back to some of the questions that we've got. Thank you for that, Marty. So I'm going to go back to some of the questions. And you go and look at the questions, and there's a ton of them that have come through. So I'm putting them all through. They're coming through thick and fast. So I'm going to try and be as fast as we've got. We've got about another 20 minutes to see what we can do. Great question here. And I'm going to open this up to anybody, which is, I've gone and hit the wrong, when you hit the wrong button on this, and I put that back, and that was the question, right. Where have I lost it? Anyway, this one. What is the crossover point between seamless tech, between seamless tech versus budget?
I think seamless tech doesn't have so much to do with budget at all. Seamless tech is all about how much time you spend practicing before you go live. When you can do it blind, then it's going to be seamless. Otherwise, you can spend tons of money on a system, but if you don't know which button to press at what time, it's just not going to be
Well, I've just
seamless.
proved that I don't know which button to press at the right time on what I'm just doing just now. But I think you're right. I think the one thing that I notice is that I think a lot of people think that clergy and that musicians just turn up, plug in, and off they go. And I've seen the difference when people practice. And do you think that's it? What do you, I mean? I know this is David's disappeared off camera, but I know this is his mantra on a number of things. It's like practice, and he looks great. It looks polished. It's being ready. I know this is Mother's Day in America. I appreciate that people are dropping in and out, so it's a bit mad on there. Has anybody else got a comment on that one?
Yeah, I have to say I have a slightly different philosophical view on this. Maybe it's a theological one to say, God is perfect, the Almighty is perfect, but we are not. And it's okay not to be perfect. And the stress levels and everything else that is added by trying to get to a perfect position, I don't think is worth it. The way I try to do things is I model it on if you want pre-streaming. We'll go to the synagogue, that will all be relaxed, and maybe somebody will make a mistake. We won't make a big deal out of it. We carry on and support the person, and that's okay. And I think this the same. I try to bring that into the streaming as well. It's okay. If somebody makes a mistake, we carry on and we'll learn. And next time, maybe we'll do it better, but it's fine. And I actually think it creates, for us, it creates a much more relaxed atmosphere. It's not seamless, but what is?
Okay, so we've got a question which is interrelated to that one, and that which I'm going to bring up, which is from Yuval on the thing. How often do you have technical faults mid-service, and how do you deal with them? Anyone?
I would say very, very rarely. I mean, surprisingly rarely, considering more when we were still on OBS, but now I think I can only remember 2 instances with Vmix where we crashed midstream. Once because we really had total GPU overload and just crashed out, and we just restarted our computer and went back live. And once the internet in the building, actually the internet in the entire street, just disappeared. So we went and we came back a few moments later when the internet came back. Yeah, I think at that moment all you can do is smile and, I don't know, send a message from your phone.
Oren and then Marty.
I think that's very, very similar for us. We just had the same thing with the internet dropping out in the middle of Yom Kippur. That was not great. But you know what? First of all, ain't nothing much I can do about that. Second, just like Yuval said, this is not a concert. This is not a show. I mean, we tend to get uber focused on seamless tech. We forget that, you know what? They're not here to watch Elton John. I don't know. Yuval mentioned Elton John before, so he's on my mind. Live. This is a community event, right? Let's be honest. Our services were never 100% seamless and fault-free. Even we were not streaming at all. We always had the bar mitzvah boy whose voice changes in the middle of the Torah reading, right? We always had that kind of stuff. We always had the older man who's leading Psukei de Zimra who forgets what page he's on. That happens, right?
We'll see.
Marty, but I'll tell you one thing that happened to us this Friday, though. Had this complete cool pre-recorded bit of a meditative Amida that I orchestrated and mixed, and it was fantastic. And then I played it through my phone, and I forgot to change my screen, my setting, and halfway through it just dropped. So what do? You improvise. I just read myself. I made stuff up on the fly. You know what? People loved it. Who cares?
Marty and then David.
So yeah, these are very good philosophical points. I mean, to Leah's point, I could say that, you know, when a beginner or an amateur learns to do something, they practice it until they get it right. When a professional does something, they practice it until they can't get it wrong. But to Yuval and Oren's point, we're not professionals, and even professionals do get it wrong. But the difference is that when a professional gets something wrong, the audience rarely notices it because they're confident and enough and knowledgeable enough to do a recovery, do a troubleshooting, do a recovery that's seamless and smooth enough. Now, while this we're talking about fellowships here. We're not talking about, high pressure professional environments. Leadership, on the other hand, is important, and setting certain level of expectations is important because people, even your volunteers, they need to have some motivation to at least do their best to get it right. So practice is important. Continuously learning is important. We did okay today. Let's figure out, how we can do a little bit better next time.
David, we've got quite a few questions to go through, but I really want to hear from David on this one.
Yeah, I just want to double down on what Marty just suggested, and that there's something really powerful about the authenticity that comes from a real experience, a live experience where mistakes are going to be made, and that professionalism. When something does go wrong, not having to say, oh, wait, I have to share my screen. Let me press this button. I see that so often where people are narrating how they're troubleshooting the problem. I'm not interested in that. If we're davening or learning, hum a tune in the background while you're fixing the problem. Don't narrate to me that how you're screen sharing in Zoom or anywhere else. Keep the flow. Remember, there's a shefa, there's a flow to any experience, whether it's online or in person. Keep that flow while you're troubleshooting the dilemma.
Okay, we've got a question here, which to Leah, and I take it as from when you're in your presentation, you said that there are many services you did in the year. You talked about a number of different things that you did. Was there any that you wouldn't repeat?
So I think the answer is in principle I would repeat them all, but some of them were an unreasonably large amount of work for the delivery. I think the animal pet service almost killed John, our video guy, because we had hundreds of photos and short video clips of people's pets, and they kept coming in till like 10 minutes before the service. And of course, everyone wants to see their pet. And I think I would repeat animal pet service also with home recorded, but I would be much clearer about deadlines and formats and how people need to send stuff in. So I think that's where we've learned a lot, how to reduce the time it takes to work with the material that people share.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the next question from Michael Abrahamson, and I got to remember to spotlight so you can all see it. When people return to being in service in person, will you have an ambient synagogue signal that records the congregants in the synagogue participating in responsive reading and other noises? I assume that is the case. You will only feed that through to the people in Zoom and not the soul. So I take that to being, are you going to have an ambient microphone that's going to be picking up what's in the room? Marty, I could see. Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, that. So are you going to have the people who are watching at home be the equivalent of standing outside a closed window looking into the sanctuary? Or do you want to really try to bring them in and immerse them in the sanctuary experience? When you're sitting in the pews, you're hearing everybody around you singing, and you want to try and bring that home as well. You want to give people at home a sense of the people in the room that they can then at least try to feel a part of. So having what we would professionally call crowd mics or congregational singing mics or responsive mics is a really important part of that, because then you can have their sound be part of the broadcast, part of the singing. You can even get some camera shots of them during those parts of the service. Really important part of the presentation.
Thank you. Anybody else coming on that? David? Yep.
I was just going to say, I think in most of our synagogues, you won't need it because our sound systems are just crappy enough that they pick up everything in the room. We don't have fancy directional mics and, the speakers set properly. And so it's good. The microphones are going to pick up everything anyway. So I think you'll have that.
Yeah.
I wanted to chip in here and say, to make a very similar point to that of David, and say our microphones are so good that they're actually picking up the congregation as well. But we have another issue, which is a security issue. We want to control what can and cannot be heard, and part of what we don't want is for anybody's sound to be audible if we don't want them to be audible. And the same goes with the camera. The big debate in our synagogue, security is a big issue.
Moving on to the next question we have here, which is coming from Stephen Rabin. How much computing power do you need to run Vmix? So that was a question for others there, but far away. Leah?
So I think I actually replied in the comments to him. Vmix on their website has like some specs that you can look at, but I would say try it. It makes a huge difference whether you run Vmix with 5 inputs, a couple of cameras and whatever, or whether you want to do instant replay. And I'm still waiting to do a bit of instant replay with Hackbow or something like that. But no, I'm just kidding. But you just need to see, look at their website. It'll tell you, it gives you an idea, but then it'll depend on your
My
setup.
answer to that is it's not that dissimilar to OBS. They're using different technologies, but for where you are, where most people are, it's a move from there. So I don't think it's a big difference there. We got a similar question to the one before, and this time I've actually clicked on the right button for it, which was the one I was trying to do for any there. Is what was your biggest fail over the last year, and what did you learn from it? For those that have been in the last year, what went wrong, and what did you learn from it? Nobody admitted to anything going wrong. David.
I'll give a quick one, and that is, and I actually did a video on this, is, I have spent so much time thinking about my own technology that I have not spent a lot of time thinking about the technology of the people that I am presenting to. And so I actually invited everyone to use an alternative platform to Zoom, and 2/3 of the people couldn't access it because it wasn't mobile friendly, and they were all using iPads to watch this, to participate in the service. So, just remembering that having all the best tech in the world is fantastic, but it's not about yours as much as it is about theirs.
Leah.
So we, from what you saw, we've been primarily doing streaming where we didn't then have like lots of people also in a Zoom room. We decided, or my colleague decided, that for the high holidays, he wanted one of our services on Yom Kippur to be in Zoom, because it's normally our alternative service where we sit in a circle and so on. And we kind of did it, and then we discovered that we'd never connected the audio feed from OBS into Zoom, so none of the videos that we were playing had any sound, which was like half of the pre-recorded music. And it was terrible. It was absolutely shockingly awful. It was awful for all of us. We had the congregation was totally not used to Zoom. So we had all the catastrophic, you're on mute, No, now you're on mute. You're on mute. So basically, like, don't try things like that for Yom Kippur. If you're gonna try something really different, like you don't think you can just change platforms. It might look really simple, but it's probably quite a different work process that you need to think about.
So we've got a question in here, which is an interesting one. I'm not sure if we've got the time to cover it in great detail. How do you get and train qualified volunteers, says Judy Kern. Has anybody got anything that they want to mention on volunteers?
Yeah,
Yuval?
I can mention just to say that what we did is we trained one of the volunteers who we sat actually together and configured the system. And when he felt confident enough to do it himself a few times, he started training the other volunteers. And he drew up a list. There is a checklist that they come every time they run a session. They need to go through. They know what they need to switch off and on, and all the checks. They still do it with holding hands, and some of them do it with that volunteer for a couple of sessions, and then do it themselves. That seemed to be very successful for us.
So we've got two questions that we're rushing through time here, but we've got two questions which sort of come together. So I'm going to bring this in. The first one is, some gear eventually wears out and breaks and becomes obsolete. How do we plan for cycles of gear to replace maintenance and of gear, repair, maintenance, replace? And also the same or a similar question, which is here from Yuval, is what maintenance and upgrade processes do you have in place? So has anybody thought about the next stage yet?
Well, life cycle budgeting is an important thing, and is not, when it comes to technology, life cycle is not something that a lot of houses of worship put a lot of thought into until now, because there's so much more technology being employed. But when you think about, your air conditioner only has a lifespan of so many years. The roof on the top of the building has a lifespan of so many years. Well, technology is changing so rapidly, and the needs for the technology, the application for how the technology is being used also is now changing much more rapidly. And the hardware itself, the software itself, is being rapidly improved all the time. So you do need to do life cycle budgeting.
Leah?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's more about budgeting, making sure you have a budget for, like, we used to have a budget of 20,000 for a year for the building. So now we're going to have 5,000 a year at least for whatever comes up with tech.
I think the worst example I always had, and I was talking to Marty about this earlier, is projectors. Projectors have always been one of those things where you spend a fortune on them. You hardly ever use them the amount of time they're supposed to be used. And then when you go to use it again a year and a half later, it's out of date, because the technology moves on, and they're super difficult to keep up to date. But it is going to be something I think everybody's going to have to look at, putting their budgets in and to work out where we are. We're running out of time. I want to move on to the next thing before we finish up, or we won't get to these questions. Yuval asks again, I know there's AI automation for changing subtitles in theaters. Can this be applied to services? My view is that we've got to get to one language. This is going to be the problem, I think, at the moment. We will suffer. I'd like to see it happening in churches. I think I can see churches getting there. And if churches get there, then I think we can follow. But I think the fact that we have so much in multiple languages, I think will be tough. Marty, did you want to come on that one?
Yeah, there's all kinds of automated AI translation and captioning, Google and several other platforms, and these are all in software and in the cloud. However, there are some hybrid solutions. There's hardware combined with software and cloud that actually can work better. I'm looking into these, as a matter of fact. There's a system that you connect. It's a hardware system. You connect it on your location, and then it also has internet connection for cloud service. And it can do. You can do your caption. You can do your translation. It works in like 27 different languages and 70 different dialects. So it's very interesting.
So there was a quick one in here that was Brody has come up with something similar. A flexible option for advancing and highlighting slides is the Logitech Spotlight Presenter. I don't know it myself. It works in person up to 30 meters from a computer or virtually on a Mac PC, and he's given a link to it there. So I think this is going to be a really interesting area of how things are going to move along. It may be that, and I just speaking out of turn because I don't know the complexity of this, but we're going to be seeing liturgy that's going to be coming out in 3 or 4 years' time that is going to be pre-built to page flip automatically with something, and a good example. I mean, when we talk about page flipping there, a lot of the equipment can actually also have things like foot controls. And I think what Brett or somebody else showed the foot pedal control for advancing it. Was it David? Was it you that showed this? Yeah, it was. So there are ways and means of doing that could do it. But actually, once you get used to it and it gets trained, as you were saying, Marty, maybe you're actually it's going to be hearing and following along, almost bouncing along as long as there's uniformity. Question from Beverly Sperry here. I sang in the churches for many years, and my experience was that the time you heard the accompanying instruments, you were lagging behind them. Is this something you make allowances for with delays? And I assume that's in the mixes. So practicality there.
Yeah, no, you don't do this with delays because that's after the fact. If certain singers are singing behind other singers, that's something that everybody in the room is going to be experiencing. And the two ways to solve that problem, everybody wants to sing in time, right? And at the same time and in time. That's one of the reasons that I gave for using monitor speakers, so that all the musicians can hear and play exactly at the same time. The other solution is to have a conductor. Everybody follows the conductor.
I think one of the things that we all experience is, when we sit there and sing something like Happy Birthday, the whole room can sing it. It doesn't actually need to be in perfect unison and time. We get away with it, but it doesn't really work when you're doing some of these when you're doing some services, or when you're doing chanting where you're singing backwards and forwards to people. So this is where we're going to see some interesting things. As we keep saying, we will come on to the hybrid part of that later. I've got one last question before our final one. Again, from Michael Abrahams, continue from above. What type of mic would you use to record? And this is he was talking about in the room to record, and how do you prevent it picking up output from the PA system so you can ensure you're getting a clean source? Marty, what sort of boundary mic would you be using?
So the acoustics of the room are going to play an important part here in choosing what microphone and where the microphones would be, the kinds of loudspeakers and ensuring that they're properly positioned, and propagating sound down to where the people are instead of bouncing off the walls and ceilings and such. But generally speaking, you want to use a good cardioid microphone or a short shotgun microphone. You want to position them in such a place where, directional microphones have the characteristic is that they pick up sound from the front and they reject sounds coming from various angles in the back. And so you want to position your microphone so that the speakers are in the rejection zone behind the microphone. There's a bit more to it than that. We don't have the time to get into it right now.
There's a lot more to it. All I can say from past experience, and this is happened many, 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 many times, the minute you put a microphone into listening to people in the congregation, you pick up what they say. And if you haven't worked out what that problem with that is, you can listen to what they say, and they don't necessarily say the things you want them to say on mic.
Yeah, and you want to control that by not having those microphones on, anytime that you don't want to hear what they're saying or singing. So you only have it on when they're singing, and you don't have it so close to any row or people that you hear them more distinctly than everybody else. They want to be far enough away that they're hearing everybody evenly and not certain people more than others.
Absolutely. We've got one last question from Judy Kern. What is the best way to handle hybrid audio, both streaming and in-house audience? Really good question, Judy, and thank you for asking it. And it will not be the one that we're going to be answering today, because we're going to be answering that in a couple of weeks' time, because what we wanted to do today was to give an understanding of what audio is and where the audio is going, so that you know where we're coming from and get a feel. Next week is Shavuot. So we're going to be going all night long. We're not going to be doing this all night long, but I know I'm on a overnight Shavuot session. So we're not going to be having a streaming tech, dreaming, Synagogue Tech next week. The week after, as I mentioned earlier, it's the WUPJ's conference, and in their Connections program on the 20th of which at 8:15 UK time, 3:15 in the afternoon on the Thursday, we're having a live session. They've decided to increase and make the program even better than they normally do by having us on. So we're all going to be on there, which we welcome you all to join us in the only session that you're probably going to get out of Jordan for free, because everything else you're going to have to pay to attend. So this will be free, but you can join us on there, and we're going to be on that session. So we welcome your questions. We're going to be covering some more over what the examples of people and where they've gone, and we'll be looking forward to some other case studies and examples of people showing them people what we've done, and we'll be drilling down and doing the breakdown as we've done today. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to stop the live stream. We have the after session discussion in Zoom. If you want to join us, for those that are in the attendees, you would have got a link when you joined in the Zoom thing. For those that are watching on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and everywhere else, thank you for joining us. You can still click on that Zoom link. It will take you through. You can register and you can join us later. I really would like to thank our panel today, and it's their real brains that have driven this today and their knowledge and insight. So I'd like to thank Marty, Oren, Leah, Yuval, and David in what they've done today, and look forward to hearing from lots of other people and their experiences and how we can move forward into this promised land of the hybrid. Hopefully we will take less than 40 years to get there. Thank you again, and good night.